Okay, let's dive right into this. We're about to uncover a really fascinating, and honestly, a little-known story from the history of Japanese technology. It's all about this quiet, super determined quest to build, well, the perfect code.
So, what if I told you that what some experts, I mean real experts, considered the ultimate form of a programming language wasn't born in Silicon Valley? What if it was actually meticulously crafted right here in Japan? I know, it's a pretty bold claim, right? So let's unpack that.
All right, so here's how we're going to get to the bottom of this. First, we've got to bust a common myth about Hitachi. Then, we'll dive into the database they actually built to take on the giants. From there, we'll look at their quest for a more natural language, and you'll see how their unique design philosophy gave them this incredible hidden advantage. And finally, we'll pull it all together and reveal the invisible foundation that makes this whole story so important.
Okay, so to really get to the heart of this, we first have to look past the obvious. We've got to challenge a myth that's been around for a long time about Hitachi's software.
You see, for decades, when you thought about Hitachi and foundational software, you probably thought of one thing: COBOL. And for good reason. They were an absolute powerhouse in the world of COBOL, the language that basically ran so much of Japan's critical infrastructure. They developed it, they led the industry groups. They were totally synonymous with it.
But here's the thing. That wasn't the full story. Not even close. Hitachi's real ambition, what they were really after, went much deeper. We're talking beyond just programming languages, and way down into the very core of how systems actually work.
And that right there brings us to the true foundation of it all. Because, to build any large, complex system, you need one absolutely essential piece: the database. This is where the real story starts to get interesting.
And what's just so remarkable here is the sheer audacity of it all. Think about it. Back in the 80s and 90s, the database world was completely dominated by these global giants. You had Oracle, IBM, Microsoft. And into this arena steps this lone challenger from Japan, Hitachi, with its own database called HiRDB. They weren't just using the tools everyone else was using. No, they decided to build their very own from the ground up. So now we're about to go even deeper into the actual language they created for this thing. And by the way, if you're enjoying this little deep dive into some hidden tech history, do me a favor and hit that like button. It really helps us out and lets us know that you want to see more explainers just like this one. Click.
Okay, this is where the story gets truly remarkable. See, Hitachi didn't just stop at building the database engine itself. They focused intensely on the language you'd use to talk to that database. They basically reimagined the whole thing from the ground up.
So the crucial point to get here is that, yeah, they called it SQL, but this was something different. It was a totally unique version, specifically and intentionally designed just for HiRDB. This wasn't some happy accident. It was a very deliberate choice to build something that was just plain better.
And look, anyone who has ever worked with databases knows this exact feeling. You learn SQL, you think you've got it, but then you move from, say, an Oracle database over to Microsoft's SQL Server, and boom, suddenly things just don't work. The syntax is just slightly off. It's so frustrating.
This is the everyday reality for so many developers. It's a world of these small but just constant frustrations. You're forced to memorize all these little exceptions and irregular rules for each different database you work with. And all that does is create friction that slows you down and, worse, introduces bugs into your code.
And this brings us to Hitachi's secret weapon, because they looked at all of that friction, all that annoyance, and they didn't see it as something you just have to live with. No, they saw it as a design problem, a problem they could actually solve.
And you know what? They did solve it. Pretty soon, experts, the people who worked across all these different databases every day, they started to notice something. The consensus became clear. Hitachi's version of SQL was by far the most consistent. It just had the fewest quirks.
So what does no quirks actually mean in practice? Well, it means the syntax was really well structured, the rules were consistent across the board, it was just easier to understand and easier to use. In a world that was full of all this technical friction, Hitachi had designed a language that was smooth, intuitive, and felt, well, natural. And really, this idea of a deep, intentional design philosophy, that's the key takeaway here. If you're finding this kind of insight valuable and you want to see more of these hidden stories from the world of tech, it would be awesome if you'd subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive. Click tick, thumbs up.
All right, so let's zoom out a bit and talk about the real takeaway from this whole story. What's the big lesson we can learn from HiRDB's quiet pursuit of perfection?
Now look, it's true. HiRDB did not go on to conquer the global market like Oracle did. But if you only focus on that, you're missing the entire point of the story. Its real value isn't measured in market share.
The point is the incredible depth of engineering capability that this represents. I mean, just think about the layers here. Hitachi didn't just use the existing tools. First, they built the foundational database itself. Then, they designed the language on top of it to control it. And then, and this is the amazing part, they refined that language over and over to make it intuitive for actual human beings. That is truly deep foundational work.
And this brings us to a really crucial lesson for today, for right now. It's so easy to get excited by the flashy front-end applications, right? The stuff you see on the screen. But what this story shows us is that the real lasting competitive advantage, it often lies in the invisible foundation. It's in those quiet, essential layers underneath that are designed with real care and a solid philosophy.
And this, right here, is the central idea of it all. A tool that is easy and natural to use doesn't just happen by accident. It is the direct result of a clear design philosophy. Hitachi proved that thoughtful, human-centric design, even way down in the deepest parts of the tech stack, is an incredibly powerful competitive advantage.
So that leaves us with a final question, and it's really for all of us. When we build new things, or even when we just choose which technology to use, are we only looking at the shiny surface? Or are we brave enough to step down into that deeper foundational layer, the place where the real design philosophy lives?
It's really a challenge, isn't it? To look beyond the surface and to really appreciate the design of all these invisible tools we use every single day. And maybe, just maybe, to even start demanding that same level of thoughtful design in the things we build ourselves.